Imagine for a second that you have everything.
Right.
And I don't just mean you're doing well. I mean, you have reached the absolute pinnacle of your chosen profession. You have 4 Emmy Awards sitting on your mantle. You have a Golden Globe.
Yeah, the dream.
Exactly. You have a paycheck that officially makes you the highest paid actor on American television for 4 consecutive years. You are universally recognized. Now, imagine admitting to the world years later that you were absolutely miserable through almost all of it.
Wow.
Not just having a stressful season, or dealing with burnout, but fundamentally miserable during the very years everyone assumed were the best of your life.
Yeah, it highlights a profound disconnect between the public image of success and the private reality of surviving it.
Definitely.
When you look at the notes and the biographical research you shared with us for this deep dive, that contrast isn't just surprising, it's genuinely jarring.
It really is.
We're looking at a man who was making millions of people laugh every single week, while internally, he was quietly, systemically falling apart.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the subject of our deep dive today is Jim Parsons, the man who made Sheldon Cooper a household name on The Big Bang Theory.
Right.
And we are looking specifically at the bombshell revelations he just made this July of 2026 at the age of 53. Our mission today, using these materials you provided, is to peel back the layers of a man who spent his absolute peak years terrified of losing everything.
Yeah, it's a lot to dig into.
We are going to explore the hidden costs of fame, the crushing weight of keeping secrets, and perhaps most intensely, this haunting internal countdown clock that was secretly dictating his every move.
And I think it is crucial to establish right away that this isn't, a standard celebrity retrospective.
No, not at all.
It is a profound look at human psychology. It's a study in how a person's relationship with time, and specifically with mortality, can dictate their biggest career moves and their daily anxieties, even while millions of people are watching them perform on a brightly lit sitcom stage.
To even begin to understand why he eventually wanted to escape his own success, we have to look at the mechanics of how he got there.
Right, his background.
Because the struggle of his early days bred a very specific, deeply ingrained anxiety. The research you sent over paints a grueling picture of the television industry. Before Big Bang Theory, Jim Parsons auditioned for roughly 30 different roles where he actually booked the part, only to watch the network reject the pilot.
30 times!
Wait, just to clarify the process here, he actually had the job, signed the contract, filmed the episode, and then it just evaporated.
Precisely. And we have to consider the psychological toll of that specific mechanism.
I can't even imagine.
Right. In the acting world, booking a pilot means you've already beaten out hundreds of people. You've run the gauntlet of casting directors, producers, and studio executives. Your brain tells you, I have finally made it. My life is about to change.
Yeah.
And then a boardroom of executives looks at the finished product, decides the show isn't getting picked up for a full series, and you are instantly back at zero.
Oh, man.
Going through that cycle of extreme validation followed by total rejection 30 times creates a profound sense of instability. It actively breaks down your ability to trust good news.
He even auditioned for the American version of The Office around that time, which didn't work out, which is incredibly ironic considering he privately thought adapting that brilliant British show for Americans was a terrible idea that was doomed to fail.
He missed the mark on that prediction.
He really did. But there's a deeper irony in his background. The guy who would go on to play television's most famous, iconic theoretical physicist actually failed science in school.
Right.
The notes mention he only even liked meteorology because he grew up in Houston, right in hurricane country.
It perfectly illustrates how unpredictable his path was. He wasn't destined to play a genius scientist. He was an actor desperate for a break after dozens of false starts.
Exactly.
When that break finally materialized with the Big Bang Theory, he felt such a strong, immediate gravitational pull to the character of Sheldon that his preparation bordered on obsessive.
Oh, absolutely. He actually skipped a party the night before the audition just to memorize his lines. His read was so specific, so dialed in, that the show's creator, Chuck Lorre, reportedly thought it was a fluke.
Yeah, he made Jim come back and read a second time just to prove he hadn't just gotten lucky.
But that so-called beginner's luck effectively turned into a cage. Because once he got the part, the anxiety of those 30 failed pilots didn't just vanish, it mutated.
Right.
According to these notes, Jim felt like he had dozens of spinning plates in the air at all times. He was terrified before every single take that he would forget his lines. People on the outside looked at his excessive preparation and praised his acting discipline.
Sure, they thought he was just dedicated.
But looking at the psychological mechanics of it, it sounds less like professional discipline and more like holding your breath during a marathon.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
It's like having 50 tabs open on your web browser and 30 of them are playing high-definition video, but you're trying to convince everyone in the room you're just quietly reading a single PDF. The internal fan is screaming, the battery is draining, but the screen looks calm.
What's fascinating here is that this wasn't just a quirky actor being a perfectionist. This was a textbook trauma response to his early career rejections.
Right.
When you are denied stability 30 times in a row, you develop a desperate need to control every possible variable. Jim's intense preparation wasn't born out of a healthy, joyous love for the craft. It stemmed from a complete inability to trust his own success.
He was just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. He fundamentally believed that if he dropped even one of those spinning plates, if he flubbed one line or missed one mark, everything he had built would instantly shatter and he'd be right back to waiting tables. Think about a time in your own life where you over-prepared for a presentation or a meeting, not because you were passionate about the project, but because you were terrified of your boss. Now, multiply that pressure by 30 million viewers tuning in every Thursday night.
If keeping those professional plates spinning was that exhausting, imagine the toll of adding a massive, highly guarded personal plate to the mix.
Yeah, the weight of that.
The anxiety of keeping his career afloat was magnified tenfold by a deeply personal secret he was carrying, one he believed could destroy his entire livelihood. Jim had a passion for acting from a very young age, doing school plays from 1st through 12th grade. But he actually quit at one point to pursue a sensible business degree.
Which is wild to think about now.
Right. He only found his way back to acting because of encouragement from his then-boyfriend, Todd Spiewak.
That relationship with Todd became the absolute anchor of his adult life. They eventually moved to Los Angeles together after Jim pursued a master's degree in classical theater. But as he started trying to build this career in New York and LA, he was harboring an intense fear of being discovered as a gay man.
The actual mechanics of how he hid himself are what stand out the most in the research you provided. When he lived in New York City, he didn't just keep quiet. He actively engineered his life around avoidance.
He had to.
He would intentionally steer clear of pride parades. He would completely avoid gay-friendly neighborhoods. He mapped out what he considered invisible city blocks, choosing to walk down those specific streets just to blend in, rather than risk being noticed for who he actually was.
We really need to talk about the concept of cognitive load here.
Okay, yeah.
Navigating the most densely populated city in the country while constantly running a background program of threat assessment is physically exhausting. Cognitive load refers to the amount of working memory resources your brain is using at any given time.
And his was constantly maxed out.
Exactly. When you are hiding a fundamental part of your identity, a massive percentage of your brain's processing power is dedicated to monitoring your environment, analyzing how you are perceived, and calculating escape routes. It leaves significantly less mental energy for everything else, including acting.
Imagine if every time you walked to grab a coffee, you had to calculate if someone was going to discover a secret that could get you fired.
Exactly.
And then he transposes that exact same fear onto the biggest television stage in the world. He was playing a universally beloved character to a massive, mainstream, and at the time, not always progressive audience.
The perceived risk was astronomical. We have to remember the television landscape of the late 2000s and early 2010s. Network television leading men, especially on highly lucrative sitcoms, were not coming out publicly.
No, it was a totally different era.
The fear was that the audience would suddenly reject the character if they knew the truth about the actor.
But then he finally does come out publicly right after a Big Bang Theory season finale. And the catalyst wasn't some grand political statement or PR strategy. It was simply that his relationship with Todd, which had been going on for a decade at that point, mattered way too much to keep filtering through a lens of secrecy.
Yeah, they eventually married in 2017.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Jim feared that being authentic would ruin his career, but leaning into his identity actually gave him unexpected strength. He found that being part of a community that still faces hostility gave him a resilience he didn't know he had.
It's a beautiful paradox, isn't it?
It really is.
The very thing he thought would be his downfall became his armor. There is a deeply poignant detail in the notes you shared that highlights this. Long before they were legally allowed to marry across the country, Jim and Todd were quietly honored at an awards ceremony as an inspirational gay couple.
Oh, right.
But Jim didn't even understand the accolade. To him, there was no activism involved in their daily lives. He viewed his relationship as just ordinary love.
Wait, I want to pause on that phrase, ordinary love, because it perfectly highlights the massive disconnect between how the public perceives a celebrity's private life and the mundane reality they are actually living.
Exactly.
The public sees a brave, trailblazing couple making a statement, and Jim just sees the guy he eats breakfast with and shares a dog with.
Precisely. It reveals how exhausting it is to be flattened into a symbol when you are just trying to live your life.
Yeah.
But coming out, while it relieved this massive, crushing cognitive burden of secrecy, it didn't solve his underlying anxieties because a much darker, ticking clock was still running in the background of his mind.
Yeah, that countdown.
And this underlying countdown is the true driving reason he ultimately walked away from television's biggest show.
Let's get into the math of mortality. To understand this, we have to rewind to April 29, 2001. Jim's father, Milton, who was the president of a plumbing company in Houston, dies in a solo car accident.
Right.
He was 52 years old. Jim was only 28 at the time.
The chronology here is vital. Jim was 28. This tragedy strikes a full 6 years before he ever booked the role of Sheldon Cooper. His father never saw any of the massive success, none of the Emmys, none of the global recognition.
Years later, Jim actually went on that show, Hollywood Medium, and a psychic offered him some comfort, telling him that no faster medical response could have saved his dad that day, which, maybe brings some peace to the lingering what-ifs that plague anyone who loses someone suddenly.
Sure, closure.
But it did absolutely nothing to stop the mental math Jim had started doing. Which brings us to the ultimate turning point, the year 2018. Jim is 46 years old, and he realizes, looking at the calendar, that he is exactly 6 years younger than his father was when he died.
That realization fundamentally alters his worldview. The abstract concept of mortality suddenly sharpens into a very specific, tangible deadline.
So he asks himself, if I only have 6 years left, do I want to spend it playing Sheldon Cooper?
And the answer was no.
He went straight to the producers, Chuck Lorre and Steve Malaro, and told them he was done. The cast was completely blindsided. Kaylee Cuoco said she could barely breathe when she found out. Johnny Galecki said he felt totally shocked.
It was a massive shock to the industry.
But hold on, let me challenge this for a second. Are you saying the money didn't factor in at all? It's genuinely hard to believe someone just walks away from $1 million an episode purely because of a birthday. So he didn't walk away because he was tired of the character. He walked away because he was literally racing a ghost. He didn't leverage this for more money or a lighter schedule.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes perfect sense. This isn't about Hollywood negotiations. It is fundamentally about how humans process profound grief and a lack of control.
Okay.
When we experience sudden trauma, we look for patterns. We create arbitrary milestones to make sense of the senseless. For Jim, 52 wasn't just the age his father died. It became a looming finish line he was terrified of crossing. By leaving the show, he wasn't just making a career choice. He was aggressively taking back control of a narrative his father never got to finish. He was refusing to let his final hypothetical 6 years be dictated by a grueling network television shooting schedule.
That's intense.
Have you ever hit a milestone, maybe an age your parents were, when something major happened that suddenly made you reevaluate every choice you were making?
It's an incredibly heavy realization, but the cruel irony is that taking control of his timeline like that didn't magically insulate him from tragedy. Grief just continued to haunt him, and it started to blur the lines between his real life and his performances in this highly surreal way.
Yeah, the end of that era was really tough.
Just look at the actual mechanics of how The Big Bang Theory ended for him personally. As filming for the highly anticipated final season was winding down, he and Todd had to euthanize their dying dog at home.
Right.
Then just days later, while the whole world is celebrating this massive, joyful farewell to the show, Jim injured himself on stage.
He described that specific period as standing on the edge of a genuinely dark cliff. And the dissonance of that environment is staggering. You have a multicam sitcom setup, bright lights, 4 cameras, and a live studio audience sitting just feet away, expecting to laugh uproariously at this character.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the actor portraying him is standing there experiencing acute, compounding personal trauma.
And it doesn't stop there. Fast forward to 2025, Jim is starring in this Hulu comedy called Mid-Century Modern with Nathan Lane, Matt Bomer, and the legendary Linda Lavin.
Right, so such a great
It's
cast.
a sort of Golden Girls-esque dynamic. Linda Levin was universally adored by everyone on this set. But then, tragically, she dies suddenly from lung cancer at the age of 87, with 3 episodes left to film for the season.
The creators of the show were faced with an impossible narrative situation.
Yeah.
But Lavin had made her wishes remarkably clear. Before she passed, she explicitly told the writers not to shy away from the truth. So they made the decision to write her real death into the fictional story.
The details of how they executed this are staggering. On her way to the hospital in real life, Levin turned to her husband and told him, "I love you in case this is it." The writers put those exact words into the script. They had Levin's character say those precise dying words to her television son.
It's just heartbreaking.
And Jim Parsons is standing right there filming this fictionalized version of his friend's death mere weeks after she actually passed away. It's like the boundary between reality and performance just completely collapsed. He's actively grieving a real friend while reciting her actual dying words for a camera lens.
It is a profound scenario to try and process psychologically, and it really exposes the unique, frankly bizarre toll of the acting profession.
Completely.
As an actor, you are contractually obligated to tap into deep emotional reservoirs on a highly regimented shooting schedule. To process profound, fresh, personal trauma while a director is calling action and cut, it highlights an extreme isolation that comes with the job.
Yeah, you're not allowed to just grieve.
Exactly. You are surrounded by a crew of hundreds. You are preparing to be watched by millions, but you are experiencing your grief in a vacuum because it's being commodified and filtered through script.
Which brings us to where Jim Parsons finds himself right now in July of 2026. All of these compounding experiences, the terror of those 30 early network rejections, the suffocating cognitive load of the closet, the ticking countdown clock of his father's age, and the surreal collapsing boundaries of grief on set, it all culminates in his current mindset.
Right.
Jim is now 53 years old. He has officially lived 1 year longer than his father ever got to be. And he explicitly refers to this current era of his life as bonus time.
Bonus time is an incredibly powerful framing. It means the internal deadline he set for himself has expired. The ghost he spent 2 decades racing has finally been passed.
He made it.
Yeah, he is no longer operating on borrowed time. He is on his own time.
And of course, the universe just couldn't resist throwing in a bizarre sense of irony. Right as he is giving these incredibly honest, peaceful interviews this July, finally comfortable in his own skin, a viral internet hoax suddenly claims that Jim Parsons has died.
Oh, the internet.
I know. It generated almost 1 million reactions before his representatives could shut it down. People were actively mourning his death online, while in reality he was sitting in a place of truer peace than he'd ever known, giving interviews about how genuinely happy he is to be alive.
The irony is stark. While the internet was projecting a fake tragedy onto him, he was finally experiencing a real life. A life that was no longer actively dictated by fear.
He is so done with that fear that he has flatly refused to ever put on Sheldon Cooper's cardigan again for any kind of reboot.
Good for him.
Yeah, he's just doing what brings him joy now. Right now, that means starring on Broadway in the musical Titanic. Although, according to your notes, he admits he still gets terrified of blanking on his lines on stage. So the nervousness never fully leaves his system, but his fundamental relationship to that fear has completely changed. He's not memorizing lines out of a desperate need for survival anymore.
Precisely. The fear is no longer existential. And there's a lovely detail in the research about how his entire approach to the industry has shifted.
Yeah, with young Sheldon.
Exactly. Even Young Sheldon, which became a massive spinoff hit, didn't start in a high-pressure boardroom pitch meeting. It started just as a casual, organic chat with Todd about Jim's own smart, slightly different nephew.
He just pitched the concept to Chuck Lorre on a whim.
Yeah, it came from a place of genuine connection and curiosity rather than a desperate need to keep a plate spinning.
So, what does this all mean when we zoom out? When I look at all this research you brought us, I just marvel at the sheer audacity of his choice. He traded a guaranteed fortune, literally holding the title of the highest paid actor on television, for the freedom to just be a 53-year-old man who isn't afraid of his own reflection anymore.
It's an incredible pivot.
He looked at the money, looked at the prestige, and decided, I need to go find out who I actually am before my hypothetical time runs out.
This raises an important question about how we, as a culture, define tragedy versus victory.
Okay, yeah.
When Jim Parsons walked away from The Big Bang Theory, a lot of fans and industry insiders viewed the end of the sitcom as a tragedy. But the real tragedy wasn't a television show ending. The real tragedy is that a brilliant, highly successful man spent decades of his life treating his own survival like a countdown clock.
That is so true.
He spent his prime years entirely unable to enjoy his massive achievements because his brain was constantly bracing for the impact of losing them. The ultimate victory here isn't the Emmys on his mantle. The victory is that he finally realized he possessed the power to step off the treadmill.
To sum up this incredible journey we've been on today, based on your notes, we started with a terrified young actor whose brain was rewired by constant rejection, forcing him to hide his authentic self just to survive the cognitive load of the industry.
Right.
We watched him carry the immense, crushing weight of a multi-million-dollar franchise on his shoulders, terrified of dropping a single spinning plate. And finally, we saw a man who looked at the haunting timeline of his father's early death, did the terrifying mental math, and made the brave decision to reclaim his own narrative, walking away from an empire to step into his bonus time.
And to you, the listener, this is why this deeply personal story matters to your own life.
Absolutely.
Why should you care about the psychological trajectory of a sitcom star? Because fundamentally, we all have our own versions of those spinning plates. We all have fears of failure that keep us locked into routines or jobs or relationships that no longer serve us.
We really do.
And all too often, we wait for a catastrophic tragedy or a looming, terrifying milestone to finally give ourselves permission to put those plates down. Jim Parsons' story is a masterclass in not waiting for the crash to finally change the trajectory of your life.
Which leads me to a final thought for you to take with you today. Jim Parsons looked at his calendar, realized he was approaching the exact age his father died, and asked himself what he would do if he only had 6 years left.
Right.
The answer to that single question changed his entire universe. So I want you to look at your own life right now. Look at the routines you're stuck in, the obligations you secretly resent, and the things you are terrified to let go of. If you knew your own clock was ticking down to a very specific year, would you still be doing what you're doing today?